The studio lights were blazing. The audience was laughing. Steve Harvey was doing what he does best, making people smile. But then, in the middle of a joke, he stopped. His mic hand dropped. His eyes locked on an old man in the front row. The entire studio froze. What happened next would become the most unforgettable moment in Family Feud history. The grandfather, 78-year-old William Carter, sat quietly in his chair, tears streaming down his weathered face. He wasn't crying from laughter. This was something deeper. Something that would shatter every heart in that room. Steve Harvey had seen thousands of contestants. He'd heard countless stories. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what this grandfather was about to reveal. Let's go back to how this moment began. 2 hours earlier, backstage. The Carter family had arrived at the Family Feud studio with nervous excitement. William Carter, the patriarch, had been brought by his 3 adult children and 7 grandchildren. This was supposed to be a fun day out, a distraction from the weight they'd all been carrying. Because 6 months ago, William's wife of 54 years, Margaret, had passed away. The family thought the show would help him. Give him something to smile about. A reason to forget, even for a moment, the emptiness of the house he now returned to every night. William had agreed to come, but only because his granddaughter Emily had begged him. "Grandpa, please. We need this. We need to see you smile again." But William was carrying a secret that no one in his family knew. As they waited in the green room, production assistants briefed the families on the game format. The usual energy, the usual excitement. But William sat apart, his hands folded in his lap, staring at a worn photograph he'd pulled from his wallet. It was Margaret. Her smile frozen in time. Taken on their 50th anniversary. His daughter Sarah noticed. "Dad, you okay?" William nodded, tucking the photo away. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just remembering." The show began exactly as planned. Steve Harvey burst onto the stage with his trademark energy. The audience erupted. The Carters faced off against the Rivera family in what seemed like a standard episode. "Survey says," Steve shouted, pointing at the board. Answers flipped. Buzzers rang. The families laughed and high-fived. Everything was normal. William stood at the end of the line, the oldest contestant by far. When it was his turn to answer, he did so quietly, almost shyly. His family cheered him on anyway. But Steve noticed something the cameras didn't catch. Between rounds, during a commercial break, Steve walked over to the Carter family. He does this sometimes, checking in, building rapport, making sure everyone's having fun. "Mr. Carter," Steve said, extending his hand. "You doing all right, sir?" William shook it, managing a small smile. "I'm fine, Steve. Thank you." But Steve Harvey didn't become one of television's most beloved hosts by missing details. He saw the tremor in William's hand. The way his eyes didn't quite meet Steve's. The photograph corner peeking out from his shirt pocket. "You sure?" Steve asked, quieter now. The production team was gesturing for him to return to his mark, but Steve ignored them. "Because if you're not, we can take a moment. This is your show too." William's lips pressed together. He shook his head. "I'm okay. Really. My family brought me here to have a good time. I don't want to ruin it." Steve placed a hand on William's shoulder, held it there for 3 full seconds, then nodded and returned to his position. The show resumed. Then came the final question. "We asked 100 people, name something you talk to God about every single day." It was William's turn to answer. The buzzer sounded. He'd won the face-off. He had control. Steve walked over, mic in hand, that familiar smile on his face. "All right, Mr. Carter. Something you talk to God about every single day. What do you got?" William opened his mouth. Closed it. His hand gripped the podium. The studio fell silent. "Mr. Carter?" Steve's tone had shifted. The comedian was gone. This was something else. William's voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "My wife." Steve leaned in. I'm sorry, sir, I didn't catch that. My wife. William repeated louder now. His voice cracked. I talk to God about my wife every single day. The answer wasn't on the board. It didn't matter. Because what William said next changed everything. She died 6 months ago. William continued, the words tumbling out now. And every morning, I wake up and pray the same prayer. I've never told anyone. Not my kids. Not my grandkids. Nobody. Steve Harvey, the man who always has a comeback, stood frozen. What's the prayer, sir? Steve's voice was so soft the audience had to strain to hear. William looked directly at Steve, tears now flowing freely. I pray that God forgives me. Forgives you? For what? For being angry that he took her and not me. The studio shattered. You could hear it, the collective gasp, the sharp intake of breath from 200 people all at once. Women in the audience began crying openly. The Rivera family, their opponents, had tears in their eyes. Steve Harvey's microphone hand dropped to his side. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Mr. Carter, Steve said, his own voice breaking now. Do you really think God needs to forgive you for that? William nodded, unable to speak. Steve looked at the cameras, at the producers, at the control booth. Then he made a decision that defied every protocol, every schedule, every rule of television production. He dropped his microphone. The mic hit the stage floor with a dull thud that echoed through the speakers. Steve Harvey walked off his mark, off the stage, straight to William Carter. He wrapped both arms around the old man and held him while he sobbed. The studio audience rose to their feet. Not to applaud. Just to stand. To witness. To be present for something sacred. For 45 seconds, nothing happened except an old man crying into the shoulder of a man he'd never met before today. But nobody in that room, nobody watching at home, would ever forget it. When Steve finally pulled back, he kept his hands on William's shoulders. Sir, can I tell you something? William nodded, wiping his eyes. I lost my father 15 years ago, Steve said. And I spent 2 years angry at God for taking him. You know what I learned? William shook his head. God doesn't need to forgive us for loving people so much that losing them breaks us. That's not a sin, Mr. Carter. That's proof you loved right. The studio erupted. Not with applause. With something deeper. A release. Hundreds of people who'd been holding their breath, holding their own grief, suddenly given permission to feel. The Rivera family walked across the stage, abandoning their podium, abandoning the game, and surrounded William. Complete strangers, embracing him, crying with him. Steve's producer was frantically signaling from the booth. They were way over time. The network would have to cut segments. This was a disaster for the schedule. Steve saw the signals. He looked directly at the camera and said 6 words that would define his legacy. Some things are more important than points. He turned back to William. Sir, I want you to do me a favor. Anything. William managed. Steve reached into his jacket, that expensive suit jacket he wears on every episode, and took it off. He draped it over William's shoulders. This jacket has been on this show for 3 years, Steve said. It's been through 1,000 laughs, 1,000 games. But today, it got to be part of something real. I want you to have it. William tried to protest. Steve, I can't. You're not taking it from me. I'm giving it to you. There's a difference. Steve pulled a card from his pocket, his personal card, and pressed it into William's hand. You call me. Anytime. Day or night. You need to talk, you need anything, you call. William clutched the card like it was made of gold. Steve looked at the audience. How many of y'all have lost someone you love? Nearly every hand went up. And how many of you have felt angry at God for it? The hands stayed up. Then you understand, Steve said simply. This isn't one man's story. This is all of our stories. The show never aired that episode the way it was filmed. Instead, the network made a decision. They cut the game entirely. They aired just this moment. 12 minutes of unscripted, raw human connection. It became the most watched Family Feud clip in history. 60 million views in the first week. 1 billion within 6 months. But the real story happened after the cameras stopped rolling. Behind the scenes, Steve Harvey made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. He canceled his next 3 scheduled appearances. He got into his car and drove to William Carter's house in Ohio. Showed up at the door unannounced. William answered, still wearing Steve's jacket. Steve spent the entire evening there. Met the whole family. Sat in Margaret's chair, the one nobody had sat in since she died. Looked through photo albums. Heard stories about their 54 years together. And before he left, Steve did something he never done for any contestant. He arranged for the entire Carter family, all 12 of them, to attend his foundation's mentorship program. Fully funded. Every educational expense covered. Your grandmother loved you all enough to pray for you every day, Steve told the grandchildren. Now I'm going to make sure you have every opportunity to make those prayers mean something. William Carter lived for 3 more years after that episode. He never took off Steve's jacket. He wore it to every family gathering, every holiday, every important moment. His grandchildren called it Grandpa's Steve jacket. When William passed away in his sleep at age 81, his family buried him in it. At the funeral, an unexpected guest arrived. Steve Harvey, in the middle of a national tour, had flown in. He sat with the family. He gave the eulogy. I met Mr. William Carter for 15 minutes on a game show, Steve said to the congregation. But he taught me more about love, about faith, about what it means to be human than I'd learned in my entire life. He taught me that it's okay to be broken. Because broken is just another word for human. After the service, Emily, the granddaughter who'd convinced William to come to the show, approached Steve. He kept your card in his wallet, she said, handing it to Steve. Right next to Grandma's picture. He told me once that you gave him permission to grieve. That until that day, he thought he had to be strong for everyone. Steve took the worn card, tears in his eyes. He was strong. Strength isn't pretending you're not hurt. Strength is admitting you are. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The jacket, Steve's personal business card, and William's prayer became symbols of something larger than television, larger than celebrity, larger than entertainment. They became proof that in a world of scripted moments and manufactured drama, real human connection still breaks through. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That showing up for strangers can change lives. Steve Harvey never forgot William Carter. Every year on the anniversary of that episode, he posts the clip with the same caption. Some things are more important than points. The episode has been shown in grief counseling sessions, in churches, in support groups. Mental health professionals use it to teach about healthy grief expression. The American Psychological Association cited it as an example of public vulnerability reducing stigma around complicated grief. But perhaps the most powerful legacy is this. Hundreds of thousands of people have shared their own stories in the comments. Stories of loss, of anger at God, of guilt for feeling that anger. And in those comments they found community. Found permission. Found healing. One comment, with over 100,000 likes, simply said, I've been carrying this same prayer for 8 years. Thank you for making me realize I'm not alone. That's the real miracle of that day in the Family Feud studio. Not that Steve Harvey stopped a show. Not that he gave away his jacket. But that one man's secret prayer became millions of people's permission to grieve honestly. William Carter never knew his prayer would travel that far. He never knew that his moment of breaking would become other people's moment of healing. But Steve Harvey knew. And he made sure William's family knew. At the funeral, Steve gave Emily an envelope. Inside was a letter William had written to Steve 2 years after the episode aired but never sent. Emily read it aloud. Dear Steve, I'm writing to tell you that I don't pray that prayer anymore. I still talk to God about Margaret every day, But now I thank him. Thank him for 54 years with her. Thank him for the family she gave me. And thank him for sending me to a game show where I met a man who taught me that love and loss are two sides of the same gift. Your friend, William. The letter became Steve's most treasured possession. He had it framed. It hangs in his office, next to his awards, next to photos of his family. Visitors always ask about it. And Steve always tells them, "That letter is from the day I learned that my real job isn't making people laugh. It's making them feel less alone." The story of William Carter and Steve Harvey isn't about a game show. It's about what happens when we let ourselves be human in front of each other. When we stop performing strength and start sharing truth. It's about a 78-year-old grandfather who thought his grief made him weak, and a television host who showed him it made him human. And it's about a prayer that was never meant to be shared becoming the prayer millions needed to hear. Some moments transcend television. They become part of our collective story. They remind us that beneath the games, the lights, the cameras, we're all just people trying to survive loss, seeking permission to grieve, hoping someone will tell us it's okay to be broken. Steve Harvey gave William Carter that permission. And William Carter gave it to all of us.